In this episode of Heart and Head Work, we sit down with Rae Wright, my personal mentor, but also a Fortune 100 executive turned mentor and advisor, whose passion lies in guiding leaders back to themselves. With decades of experience leading major organizations through change, Rae now supports entrepreneurs and professionals by meeting them where they are and helping them live and lead from deep alignment. From spreadsheets and structure to intuition and trust, Rae shares her journey of shifting from chasing goals to honoring alignment and how a strong sense of self is an entrepreneur's greatest asset. We unpack the trap of comparison, the power of self-permission, and how reframing challenges as invitations to grow can transform your business. This episode is soul-centered, expansive, and deeply grounding. So settle in.
Welcome to Heart and Head Work, the podcast for women who want to lead with strategy and soul.
I'm Tessa, the people connector who embraces vulnerability and dreams big.
And I'm Rocky, the strategist who thrives on logic and turns vision into action.
We combined our superpowers and founded Maven, a community that empowers women.
Including Maven District, the largest collective of women-owned small businesses in the world.
This podcast is for women like you, building something real and wanting more than just business advice.
You'll hear honest conversations, practical tools, and personal stories about what it actually takes to build purpose-driven businesses.
If you're building with your whole self, heart and head, this is a space for you.
Join us on the journey.
Welcome back to the podcast, y'all. You are sitting with one of my most favorite people of all time, Rae Wright. She is probably, I don't want to put pressure on this, but one of my best and biggest mentors that I've ever had in, for sure, this chapter of my life. And she's been a big part of my life for the last 10 years. So thank you, Rae, for saying yes.
Oh, you're so welcome. I feel so honored to have that introduction. That's pretty amazing, actually.
So I want to start us off. We want to dive into Rae's story and, you know, some of the things that she's taught me and some of her secret sauce areas, in my opinion. But first, I want to just check in with both of you and myself. How we all doing?
Don't forget self.
Self.
Not a spoiler alert, but it is a spoiler alert. That may be what we're talking about
That's
today.
kind of an important piece. How are we? How are you?
Oh, okay. Both your heads turned towards me. Here we go. I woke up this morning, had a little meditation moment, and this podcast makes me super anxious. I love the idea of it, but then when I get behind the microphone, I get really stressed out. I get very shy. I start, as I've already joked, distancing myself from the microphone and then having a hard time leaning back in. And what showed up today for me in my meditation was I am scared. I am scared that what we're putting out there is not being helpful. So I don't actually feel so much about like criticism, but man, I'm worried that it's not doing anything for anybody, and wouldn't that be a drag? And so the answer that I got in response to that fear, once I recognized it, was I got a safe space. I've got people who support me in this, and all I have to do is just show up and
Be yourself.
Just be Rocky, which the fear is also Rocky is not enough. And that's the underlying fear. So, but what it made me realize was if I show up and I feel safe, I'm probably helping to expand a safer space for others. And that's doing a lot in and of itself. And that can be enough. That's how I'm feeling this morning. So here we fucking go.
That's good. That's
Let's
beautiful.
do it.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, Rae. Okay, getting sweaty again.
How are you, Rae?
I'm great. We just got back from San Diego. We had an amazing weekend. I had a great nephew who turned 4, and I love when I have a teacher that small. He was so full of wonder and amazement, and Scott taught him how to play the harmonica. He didn't question it at all. He just took to it. You know, he had this imagination and put us all in a train, and we went up steep climbs, and he was shaking. You know, it was just amazing to see his creativity and his living so big at 4 years old.
Ooh.
And we all start there.
Yeah.
So,
And how much we want them to keep it.
and how much we want to keep it. We want to, and in fact, I even said that to my sister, his grandmother. He calls her Lovey. That's her name.
Oh.
And as we
That's
left.
adorable.
I said, Lovey, I just hope that we can always be such a good influence. And she's like, I can't imagine not being anything other than that. So it was really a lovely weekend.
I heard this term called, instead of growing up, growing down. And the idea that we are constantly, as this 4-year-old will grow up, and then they reach a certain point where we're all trying to get back to being the 4-year-old, where we can be like, I'm imaginative and I'm playing an instrument and I'm making a train out of, all these people here so we can play the instruments and have fun with it.
I know. It's amazing how we spend a lifetime, like you said, growing up, becoming conditioned or becoming what we think we need to be instead of just maintaining that freedom to be who we are.
Yep.
So.
And take to things like, sure, give me a harmonica. I'll learn how to play it. No big deal.
Yeah. He looked at Scott and Scott goes, do you want to play? And he said, I can't. And Scott goes, you just blow on it. So he took it and then he blew, and then intuitively he blew in and out, and then he started going up and down, and his curiosity guided him. He didn't need anything else.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
It was wonderful. How are you, Tessa?
Well, because Rae is so important to me.
Safe space. You let it out. I'm going to move away from you for a second, but then just give me a sec. I'll be back.
I also really want to do good. Rae is our first guest, and she's a big person to me. And I have no evidence to believe that I've ever disappointed you in any way. I don't want to waste this opportunity to have others get your knowledge and get some of the lessons that I've been so lucky to have had for the last 10 years.
Well, I have to tell you, every conversation with you has been delightful. There have been none that have not filled my soul as much as done something for you. So no fear there.
Yeah, thank you. In a movement meditation this morning, Rocky and I had the pleasure of doing Qigong in the park.
So good.
Which I have had Rae come to as well.
Oh, you've gotten to go too?
Yes.
Yeah,
Love
it's
that.
a special little place. But I always, in my meditations, ask either love or my ancestors, what will they have me know today? And today, one of my ancestors popped up, which is my most favorite grandpa. And he said, with this fear that has been popping up leading up to this event today, he said, you're interesting and more interesting when you're yourself. So don't be a chicken shit. And go be yourself.
Go, Grandpa.
That's awesome.
No truer words spoken from older people and younger people.
That is such a sentence he would have used. So I just really appreciated his guidance, because it also brought me back to the light, and it wasn't him being mean. It was such a light-hearted voice, and it was like, yeah, I can do this.
Yeah, let's be
Let's
us.
go be brave. Be us.
Let's not be chicken shits.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Be brave.
I don't want to be a chicken shit. Yeah, I want to be brave.
I don't intend to be that way.
Cheers. Cheers to not being chicken shit.
Cheers.
Anybody out there who's listening, don't be a chicken shit. Just be yourself.
I
From
just thought it was
Grandpa what? What'd you call him?
Grandpa Hunter, or
Grandpa
Grandpa
Hunter.
Art was his name.
Art. Can I call him Artie?
Arthur was his
okay.
name, but Art is what he went by.
I'm going to call him Artie.
Yeah, but I never
I don't
called
think
him
he'll
that.
mind.
Grandpa
Let me know if he
Hunter.
minds.
Yeah,
Tell me later.
I think he's happy. So that is where we are at, and I want to give you just a little deeper dive about Rae and how she came into my life. I met her the first day that I found out I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, Lucy, and it was also the first day of a really intensive program that she used to lead called the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. What I love about Rae is she's got this really deep background in corporate America, which she'll speak to, and now she's completely opposite of that.
Very much so.
Right. And, but that's where I met her. And she was in this really transitional space of leaning into what I would call maybe the heart side, but also with one foot in this corporate America side. And I went up to her as the leader and I said, hey, I just found out I was pregnant. And I burst into tears and I said, I need to go to the doctor to find out if...
As is tradition.
I know, to see if this baby is real, because I had previously had a miscarriage the time before that I was pregnant. And she wrapped me in her arms and said, go, congratulations. And that was my first day that I met her. And forevermore, I knew, she was the first person I told. I knew that she was one of my people.
I feel the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And since then, she has weaved a really cool career that I hope you give us a little insight on your background, coming from growing up, as you said, a farm girl in Idaho, Bear Lake, Idaho, which our team is on our way to here in a week. So will you tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are? Who is Rae?
Yeah, so it was. I did grow up in Bear Lake, on the Idaho side, and as a farm girl, learned a lot of things about family and faith and ambition. And I was one of the only ones that in my family that decided to go to a 4-year college. So upon graduating from college, I immediately wanted to have a career. I graduated in finance and economics and started working for American Express. And at the age of 25, that took me to New York. And I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would live in New York and work in New York, let alone have the career that I had. So that was quite adventurous.
And I know you, but I don't know you nearly as well as Tessa. And when we were talking earlier, you were talking about both in your professional and your personal life, you've had this big journey from being a pure head person, purely intellectual, which of course lights me up because that's also the path I feel like I was on. So I have so much to learn from that side of things. And I want to know more about, give me that snapshot because I'm going to relate wholeheartedly to it. I was in San Francisco, you're in New York, and we're both doing the same thing.
Yeah, you land in New York and it's a big city. It's a really diverse city, and you immediately learn, boy, if I'm going to be successful here, I have to adapt to the way the city runs and to the way work runs. And even though I had a really diverse group of friends, I immediately knew that I was going to be most rewarded for my ability to solve problems. And
that sounds so familiar. Keep going. Yes.
I just leaned in, and the more I could solve and the more I could see patterns and the more it felt that it came easy to me, I was rewarded. And before long, I'm climbing that corporate ladder with promotions and possibility. And I'm like, this feels good. This feels good. And becoming more and more intellectual and stimulating my mind with thinking. The only time that wouldn't happen would be when I would get on an airplane and go back to visit my family and be immersed back into this small culture with with my family, and suddenly have that comparison that, oh wow, this is still family. No one really cares how many problems I solved, what the problems were. What really matters here is family and how people feel and the conversations that we have. And so those two worlds had to start coexisting for me. But I definitely put weight and investment more in my career side. And so I was just driven to think more and think bigger and think broader and to learn politics and to learn, how to get ahead and how to be competitive, and all of that became part of my everyday world.
And I'm just hearing, I think over and over and over again, right? And I didn't know you as this person. I know you as who you are now, which is, a couple decades later. And so where are you now so that our audience can understand that? Because you don't ever come into a room and go, well, I think, which is like what makes you so amazing now is you don't use that terminology.
Well, it lasted for a really long time. I had that investment for quite a while. It really changed when I got married, and I got married late in life. And my husband is pretty much the opposite of me. He had spent 10 years living by himself and doing a lot of inner work. And so he was trying to move away from thinking and move more into being what he called being present. And I would be like, what the hell are you talking about being present? And he would...
You can say what the fuck. You can say it.
He would say, oh, this is just, you have to be present. And I would be thinking, again, thinking.
He's just going to say, yeah.
You know, how do I get there? Just give me the 5 steps. I know I can do this. Just tell me, what are the 5 steps to get to presence? And he'd say, you just have to feel it. And I'm a big emotional person, you know. I like conversation. I don't shy away from hard conversations. And I love to have conversation. I love to communicate. I'm kind of a word nerd, so I like to find words that were more meaningful. But he would say, you need to be present. You need to be here in this moment and not thinking too far ahead or too far behind. And it would show up the worst when I would get up in the middle of the night to do a spreadsheet and figure out, when will we run out of money?
Oh.
And he would say, what are you
Been there.
doing?
I've been there.
And he said, you assume then everything stays the same. And it wasn't even like we were running out of money, but I had never been married where there were 2 people, we had accountability to each other. And so it was a whole different scenario for me. And I would get that spreadsheet going and then get sideways. And he was like, you got to give up the spreadsheet. And so things started to change by doing that.
And I think what I'm so excited for you being here for is that when most of my interaction with you is through what you've taught Tessa. So I know you kind of as, Tessa's our catalyst, if you will. And what I've always seen Tessa come back with is she goes to you most often when she's struggling with something. And when she returns, the big message I hear is, so Rae told you to just be yourself, basically, to stop looking at outside forces, to stop asking questions from the outside, to just, what does Tessa want? What does Tessa need? How is Tessa feeling? And I think that's what's going to be so cool about this conversation today is essentially your secret sauce, if I can sum it up, which seems pretty impossible to do, but it's this idea that the sense of self is our strongest asset. Whether we're an entrepreneur, a wife, a mom, whatever those identities are, we can just get rid of those for a moment and come together under this universal idea that we, knowing ourselves, is the strongest. It's the strongest asset we've got.
Right. And that took a while for me to figure that out. At first, I felt like it was
thank God, because it makes me feel better. I don't want to hear that you did it pshing.
17. She's been living that.
Out of the womb. I have all the answers.
Yeah, no, it definitely took a long time. The first, again, like I said, I invested so much in my intellect and in my understanding and my ability to solve problems. And then suddenly it started to unravel a bit. I moved from being a corporate executive to being an entrepreneur. And it was really in that transition that I started to see the first glimpses of myself and to know that I had to bet on myself. I had to know myself deeper. And I had to start understanding the difference between knowing and thinking. And at first it was a big conflict and I wasn't sure exactly the difference. But the thinking was always just this intellectual database. And then something much deeper was knowing myself. And I remember someone mentioning, to know my intuition. And I'm like, my intuition? And I suddenly started having experiences that we invited into our lives that taught me a lot about intuition and that I had always had intuition. I came with intuition. But the further I moved into thinking, the more distance built between my intuition and my thinking. And I had to somehow make that U-turn and come back to my intuition. And that was all through this discovery of self, because it can look on the external that the answer is out there. It's out there in the next job or in the next business or the next relationship. But the one thing that stays constant all the time is the relationship that you have with yourself. And if anything is going to grow richer and deeper, it's when you show up richer and deeper knowing who you are. And then it impacts what you're interacting with. So that whole sense of self became a really loud voice in my head that was like, this is not outside of you, this is inside of you. And I had to take that dive.
How do you remember an early moment that you shifted from thinking to knowing, or what it felt like, or there were the people out there that have
Yeah, no one in this room.
I'm not looking at you. That's not
100% taking notes. Okay, ready,
not-
go, Rae, go.
For the people out there that have that, have moved away from their intuition, like how did you make that U-turn, or some early examples of what that felt like?
You know, I got glimpses now and then. I remember being in New York, and it was super intense for a farm girl from Idaho to come to New York and try to figure out politics, Wall Street, live by myself. And it became overwhelming. And I had some very demanding bosses who, you know, they played politics, and I had no idea what politics meant or how you had to position yourself.
And just for clarity, you're talking about politics like inside the business
Inside the
space.
business.
Yeah, like
inside
actually how to
corporate
navigate.
politics,
Okay,
right.
Gotcha.
Relationships, and how, you know, you shouldn't become bosses with someone else's boss, because then they'd be insecure. And there were all of these things that
Power dynamics.
started happening and that I didn't understand. And I thought I was losing my mind. And so it was my first venture into really seeking a therapist that could help me kind of go through how I saw the world and understand how the way I was perceiving things was actually making it worse. And I met a great therapist, her name Tessa Warshaw, and I'll never forget it. As I'm going on and on about how scared I am, she asks me, well, have you ever done anything where you failed? And I remember looking at her like, well, no, but that doesn't mean I couldn't now.
There's that nasty but. But no, but I could.
But maybe this is the time now. And so she's the first one that introduced me to relying back on myself and to rely on what felt right, and to not start to model too much, because what had started happening was I started to model others, and I would try on, that style from that leader, or I would try on another style and find that it didn't fit me because it wasn't really innate to who I was. And so she's like, no, you have to go back and don't try to change your personality, or don't try to adapt. Just be more yourself and be really confident and comfortable in who you are. And so I started doing that. It was harder to stay with that. It helped solve maybe how to manage that one situation. Then the dynamics changed, and later I remember hearing her voice in my head like, have I ever, am I starting to perceive again a threat that I'm the author of? And am I really being my best self, my best cheerleader, my best advocate? Or am I starting to buy in now to my own story of that I can't do this? So
when we were talking earlier, you mentioned some of this as like hunting versus receiving. And I would love for you to tap more into that, because as you're describing, we're taking information from other people and adapting how we go about things, just like we described your 4-year-old great nephew, right? Which is what he's not doing quite yet, but we've all done that. And you've probably done this. I've definitely done this. How can we be better about receiving rather than hunting? Like, was it a shift for you, or is it just a mindset? I'm not looking for the answer, because I know there's not just one answer, but I'm going to write it down either way.
Well, I think it's natural for all of us, when we have a perception about ourselves, we seek to validate it. And that's where I found that I hunted for validation. So if I believed that I couldn't do something, I looked everywhere to validate that me believing I couldn't do it was true. And so I hunted for validation, and the validation was always based on the perception that I was holding. So it wasn't ever questioning the perception as much as it was like, see there, I knew I was right. There's that validation. Mm-hmm. And it was with my husband, Scott, that he started to point that out to me, that I was really seeing everything based on the fact that I hunted for it.
How'd you take that when your husband told you that you were doing something? Asking for a friend?
It was interesting because, first of all, he has a tremendous way of saying it to me, and he never wanted my feelings to be hurt. But I started to notice he was the only one that could mirror back to me in a safe way something that I had to see. And when he would say that, I would be like, oh my gosh, I do hunt for that. And it was like I told you earlier, it's like when I'm on a mission to find this green thing, it's like I will know it when I see it. And I see it and I'm like, see, there it is. There it is. And it's like, well, maybe green's not even the thing you should be looking for. And so he's the one that started to tip everything up that said, what is the perception? What is the story? And what are the bigger thing than the perception and the story is what are you making it mean to you? And so I found that it was because I was making meaning that I became a really diligent hunter to validate it.
This makes me think of like when we go into business and we're constantly taking in information from other people. Like, at Maven, we had this notion that we should be adopting women tenants as like our target audience. And we got told by the competition, no, of course you don't want to do that. You're going to kill 50% of your demographic. And we wanted to listen to some degree because, well, that makes logical sense. And also we want to be bigger and better than what we are now. So let's go after men and women. And luckily we didn't do that because the feedback was actually going to limit our potential in comparison to leaning into something that felt much more real and raw to Tessa and I, both being women, both being entrepreneurs, both wanting to make a safe space because we needed a safe space. So when we were working from that place of this is who we are, this is what we want, this is what we need, let's give it back in spades to someone else who needs it. Then the business started taking off. Then we got a better narrative. Then we got this actual story that was useful and amazing. We get to have a podcast. We get to have you on it. We get to empower other women. And all of that came from the fact that we said, we're not going to listen to the outer scope. We're going to listen to the inner scope, because if we don't, we're limiting ourselves.
Right, because we can assign experts out there all the time, people who have had businesses, people who know all the aspects of growing a business. But if it starts to become the only voice that you listen to is external, then you're not really listening to the voice that drew you to that potential of being a business owner to begin with. And there's so many potential versions of how it can show up. The one that aligns truest to you is the one that you're in alignment with, because you will then become that, hunter on that. And that's where you don't just say, oh, well, if it doesn't show up this way, I'm going to be single focused. You start to have this intuition that guides you and prompts you, and you have discernment to still make decisions and have choices and decide based on that. But you are driven by something that is in collaboration with something much bigger than an external textbook to what you're building. And that's that belief in yourself and that ability to co-create with all of the energy in the world that is meant to be here to support you to experience the best version of yourself, no matter what it is you're doing. So whether that's, someone deciding to build a business, someone deciding to be a mother, someone deciding to enter into a new relationship, all of those things come into that same lens of let me trust myself and let me just feel and hear that alignment in myself intuitively as to what it is I want to build. Some people will give criticism. Scott and I had a very unconventional marriage at first, because right after getting married, the real estate market crashed. And I said to him, you come home so unhappy, you have to quit working. And he laughed at me and said, if I quit working, I have all these obligations. I've never done that. That's just against who I am. And I said, or is it? And we made this commitment that he would quit on a certain date. And after that, he got into photography and he got into nature. And I now see that had he not started down that path to make the way, there's no way I would have found that path. And he had to start there. And as he discovered it for himself, he then created the avenue for me to discover it for me. And we couldn't have goal set our way to where we are today. So that was another thing. I ended up giving up all my goal setting process because I realized setting goals actually narrowed the potentiality of what was out there for me.
Can you hear the audience gasping?
We have to continue on. We have to dive into that.
What do you mean no goal setting? I'm listening.
Because I think I took Rae out to lunch a couple weeks ago and was like, Rae, I don't have any big goals right now. And this is where you told me, "Oh yeah, I don't goal set anymore." And I was like, "Well, how do you get anywhere? How do you live?"
Yeah.
I don't even know how to ask the question.
don't-
How do
yes.
you blank?
Yes.
Insert
how
anything.
does this work? Because, as someone who has had I am a big intuition person. However, I have been working towards a goal for so long that now that I guess I am ready for
Share the goal.
some shifting.
Let's hear it. What's the goal?
Building Maven has been a goal for a really long time. And Maven, I'm not saying is finished, but it is built. There is a very, very strong presence in what we're doing. And so I don't feel that drive and that, I'll use the word hustle, to continue to exponentially just stay on that same, path. So I asked Rae, I don't know what my next goal is. And it blew my mind when you said, "Oh yeah. I don't work off goals." Can we talk about that? Because I'm still sitting with it.
All the entrepreneurs listening are sweating, going, "No, that's bullshit. You have to have goals. You must have goals." You even said throw out spreadsheets. Fuck that. No, we need spreadsheets. We need goals. We need calculators. We need profit. Which is true. Yeah.
It feels really irresponsible to say, like, stop using goals and to stop using spreadsheets. You still have to have discernment and you have to have tools that you use. But I think it's a difference between tools that you use to fulfill your drive that you feel versus tools that become the driver.
Say that again and expand on that.
So, because I started, like, the spreadsheet getting me out of bed in the middle of the night. The spreadsheet was certainly the driver. It had a voice. It had, my attention. It could get me out of my sleep and get me out to the computer. So I had to.
What was its voice? Was it like, "Rae, you're going to run out of money"?
Yes, it was my precious. It was a very scary voice, that said, "Don't be a fool. You are going to get caught off guard, and this is going to be so painful." So it had a lot of terror and fear in it, and I had to listen to it. But now I kind of smile because I feel so very different. And had I been able to see that before, but I put so much power in that spreadsheet versus the power in me that I became not a victim, but the spreadsheet drove me. And I remember Scott and I worked with a coach in the UK. Her name was Hazel Peacock. I love that name. And
That's
Great
amazing.
name.
And the very first thing she did, I showed up with my notebook and everything, and she took my notebook and she said, "There will be no notes." And we worked with this woman for a year. And I said, "No notes." She goes, "You'll remember it when you need it." And I just remember thinking, you have no idea who I am. I take really elaborate notes.
I'm like really good at this. Let me take my notes.
And at one point I asked her again about it. And she said, "Tell me, how many notebooks do you go back to and ever reference?" And
Shut up. All of them?
None.
Yeah, right. The reality versus what you think.
Right. So I said, okay, I need to lean into this. But it was the start of understanding that at any time we have that capacity to call upon our intuition and our knowing and become resourceful to finding out an answer. Knowing it 6 months before or 3 weeks before isn't necessarily going to do anything but prepare you to then hunt for it. So it was more about living in this moment with this potential that's in front of you, and then have the discernment to know where that potential is guiding you and just keep listening to that intuition. And I know that sounds super
Witchy,
mystic, whatever you want to say.
I'm into it.
But it is such a more disciplined way to live. And it's actually easier to give all your power to a spreadsheet and start to believe that the spreadsheet has your answer. But it's much more demanding to live in the present moment and to say, is my intuition telling me yes or no right now? And am I plugged into it and listening to it? And so that was the shift. And I look and the things that Scott and I are doing and the path that we've been on for the last 3 years, there's absolutely no way I would have even known who or what to put on my vision board to get there. I wouldn't have known. And yet when we kind of surrendered to our intuition and to our trusting that we were ready and open to receive, and we were ready to, not question it, but to use discernment to move into action it, that's when things started flowing into our life that not only became more financially lucrative, but it also became less demanding so that other things could be created and that we have more time together. And again, I know this all sounds like the perfect recipe and everyone's, well, why don't you bottle that? But the problem is that it shows up so specifically tailored to who you are, because it's going to teach you. It comes with a lot of lessons, and the lessons are really personal.
Well, I want to put on my little scientist glasses and my little scientist hat and for a moment and be like, because you're mentioning, finances and you're mentioning spreadsheets, and for business owners, finances are, all consuming, right? You're constantly trying to think, how do I get money? How do I make money? How do I move money? How do we make more money? How do I pay for this, et cetera, et cetera? And do you have an example of something that you've done monetarily that didn't use a spreadsheet, that used your intuition and was successful? Because I'm listening. I need to hear that, because I think most of the time we're going like, there's no way you're going to do it without a spreadsheet. So blow my mind right now.
A really good example is I wanted to renovate a portion of our house, and I actually started to dream about an addition that we were going to put on the house. And I told Scott, I said, I want to do this. And so why don't we get a home equity loan and do this? And it was in 2019 and the start of 2019. And he said to me, no, he's a banker's son. So he said, I think the only way we do it is if we can just cash flow it. And I had kind of done the numbers and I knew how much, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get enough saved to meet not only the amount that's needed, but the timeline that I want to have this all come together? It would just be so much easier to get a home equity loan. And, but he was pretty adamant. So I said, fine. And he goes, we'll work on it. And when he says that, I know that he's like now in this intuitive, trusting space. But he went outside. We have a teepee in the backyard. And he went outside, and he often meditates in the teepee or in his garden. And he came back in later that day and he said, it's coming. The money's coming. And I remember thinking, like, how's it coming? Like,
yeah, I want to bitch slap
can you just tell me like who and when and just some specific details so that I'll relax?
Yeah, what am I supposed to type into a spreadsheet? Sell. It's coming? No, I need a formula. I need a starting point. I need the money. Yeah.
So I kind of put it out of my head and thought, all right, I just have to live with this. And maybe a week or so later, I get a phone call from a gentleman that we knew, and he said, I want to introduce you to someone that is looking for some help that maybe you can do, and would you be in agreement to go and meet with them? I didn't know this person. I didn't know that they needed help. I would never have marketed to this person. And so I went and met them, and, in that first meeting, he said, I would love for you to help us. How much would it cost? And I'm like, because I've done my amount of what that remodel is, I'm like, this amount of money. And not only did I say that, I also said, and I need this much up front, and I want to be paid a third, like in the next 3 months.
To literally align with the payments that you need to be making with your kitchen renovation.
With what I knew the renovation was, and he agreed to every single thing. And I walked out thinking, wow, there was several takeaways. The negotiation of how the cash flowed was much easier than it's ever been. I asked for way more than I've ever asked for myself. And it was so much easier all over. So we went back, we started the remodel, COVID hit, we still had the remodel finished. And by November of 2020, we finished the remodel, and the project ended shortly after that.
That's amazing. I think that's what we have, all these quotes that we're told, like, you got to spend money to make money, and you've got to like go out and do competitive, I mean, especially in marketing, competitive analysis for pricing and all of these things. And what you brought up earlier that I want you to dive back into, because you didn't actually dive deep enough into this, was the idea of drive. That knowing what you need rather than looking from the outside is something we touched on, but it's also really knowing what you need. Like the confidence, it sounds like you went into that with, came from the knowing of this information from a completely different perspective. It wasn't a business perspective. It was something that Rae wanted, which also leads me back to like, that's what you always tell Tessa. Tessa, what do you want? So that seems like something really important that we need to touch on is this thing you mentioned is drive. What is it?
Right. And it is what kind of you start to understand that says what actually limits me. And for me, there had been a couple of things. Being when I was in corporate America and I first started my business and all my clients were corporate clients, I knew, because I worked so closely with partners, and the partners of like Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young and big firms would bring me in as a sub. And so that pricing was always very easy. But in the world of pricing for myself, I never really understood it. And so finally one day I had a dear friend tell me, well, there's a coach locally that makes $1 million a year. And I'm like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way they can do that. And he said, yeah, he does it with 10 clients. And I said, and they're small business owners. I'm validating what this is. And he said, yes. And so I asked to meet with this. I asked him, I said, can you make a meeting where I could meet this guy? And he agreed to meet with me. And when we got there, he asked me direct. He said, why is it that you wanted to meet with me? And I said, I'll be very candid. I want to know what you charge to make $1 million a year with 10 clients. I mean, in my mind, I knew the math, but I wanted to know, like, how does it happen?
Yeah, how?
How do you get that? Because I don't see that. And he, first of all, kind of said to me, well, when I heard you wanted to meet with me, I had to kind of talk to my coaches, because looking at you on paper made me feel uncomfortable, which I would never have guessed. So we were both coming where each other held a key that one of us wanted. And in that conversation, as he started to explain his process to me and I was questioning him, he stopped and he goes, I know what your problem is. He goes, you decide for people what they can pay you. And I sat there for a minute. He goes, because right away you've said, well, this person, their business is this small, because I knew several of the clients that he had. And he goes, you've decided for them based on parameters you've defined that they wouldn't make that investment, and that's not your decision to make. And I was shocked because he was exactly right. I was discounting. So I had this drive, but I had a bigger answer that didn't trust myself. So I had to flip drive around to really be the drive that came from my knowing that if I really wanted to make that kind of money, then I had to trust myself, I had to know myself, and I had to know the value. And so knowing the value was something that he said, I tell everyone, the other thing I tell them is that you'll make that money up in the first year working with me. And I thought, well, I could say that. I easily know that kind of return is there. And then it was just this really wild dichotomy, like, oh, if I know the value is there, why don't I have the drive and courage to ask for the money? And it was just he was an amazing mirror for me to see that was a lesson about my own capacity and where I was the only one limiting myself. It wasn't the market, it wasn't the clients, it was myself. And so I had to change that drive to say, where else in my life do I limit myself because of my belief about who I am? And I had to lean deeper and deeper and deeper into intuition, because I knew I can't read books and have them give me something personal about me when they don't know me. The answer that's really personal is myself. And so Scott and I, we talked a lot about it, and there are two really defining moments that we took big steps that I would say cracked me open to knowing myself deeper. And the first one was the decision to do plant medicine. We went to Peru and we did the sacred plant medicine of ayahuasca, which totally blew my mind open and apart from anything that I believed. And then the second thing was I did a 10-day meditation, Vipassana.
Silent retreat.
Silent retreat for 10
She didn't
days.
speak for 10 days, y'all.
Yeah. And
I mean, that sounds kind of magical, to be honest. Like, what a relief, instead of like telling anybody what to do, instead of having to have a conversation about things, you could just shut it off. But I can also imagine that being the space in which my head goes, oh yeah, I've got your full fucking attention now. Let me give you all the scaries. Let me give you all the things you don't want to hear.
yeah, because you really start to recognize the difference between thinking, which is your mind very active, and your knowing, which is your intuition being activated. And in that 10 days, for me personally, the first 3 days were super hard because I first of all, I wanted to be a good student. That's, that drive in me. So
raise your hand if you're one of those.
Good dog.
Be proud of me.
Good dog.
Yeah, I'm a good dog.
Yeah.
you are up at 4 and you go to bed at 9:30 and you meditate all but about an hour of that. And you're sitting in the meditation hall in meditation, and they're guiding some are quiet, and some were hours of determination, which whatever position you sat in, you could not move. They disciplined it. The discipline was even harder that you weren't supposed to move. A fly lands on your nose, you just let it be. And I had some really painful experiences, but what happened was I started to get out of thinking because I had to just focus so hard on my breath to get through the hour that breathing then dropped me into these beautiful memories and moments that rose up that were the most amazing experiences that have happened in my life that just taught me such deep truths about myself. And I returned more and more and more to probably that inner knowing that I had when I was 4 and 6 and 7. I was getting back there. I was shedding without, going through this process of intentionally shedding or ripping things apart. I was just returning. And it was really beautiful at the end of it. And similarly, the trip to Peru, I remember after the first night feeling very untethered. I had never done anything like that took me out of my body in a way that was unfamiliar. And so having that experience and not really knowing how far that unfamiliar band went, and, could I just disappear? Could something just suck me up and away? I would sit next to Scott and I would say, now don't leave without having my hand, and let's not walk back to our the place we were staying unless you have my hand. And finally he said, you're really preoccupied with leaving and you need to talk to the shaman. And so we went and I told the shaman, I said, I feel just untethered, like I'm not tied anymore even to this physical world. And he said, it's because you've been shown something that is unknown to you. And he said, if you think about it, what you know is like your house. When you go in your house where your shoes belong, where your keys belong, where your purse belongs, and everything is familiar. He goes, the medicine is taking you to some place that is unfamiliar. And so instead of being consumed with the unfamiliarity of it, you need to ask the medicine tonight when you drink again, what can you teach me? What am I to learn? Why am I experiencing this unfamiliarity, what part of me that's unfamiliar? And so that was the best advice, because the next night I asked a lot of questions. And as I asked those questions, it was just like I was on hyperdrive with the medicine, going deeper and deeper and deeper. And the answer was all about me. And that feels really kind of self-serving, but it's the reality is the answer is all about the gifts that you have, the way you see the world, the story that you've created, what it's made meaning to you, and how you live in this world now that you are the author of. And I saw everything that I had authored. I saw my education. I saw living in New York. I saw the reasons why I had been single. I saw the decision to not have children. I saw all these elements of myself that were completely fine. There was no judgment about it, but how aspects of me had made all those decisions, and I could own it without regret, without feeling like I had missed something, but knowing that it was laying this perfect plan for me for the rest of my life to live. And as soon as I could open my arms to that, then I could step into that potential future that was still waiting for me, and I had still enough time on earth to do. And I think that's now what Scott and I are doing. We've both stepped into what's still possible and potential for us versus staying where we're at.
So what I want to be. it's so where I'm trying to live. Rae, one of the famous lessons around here that I have told time and time again that I was hoping you could expand on, because I think it goes right with this, is the idea that almost every hard thing is a lesson. And the way you first taught it to me, because I came to you and I was like, we've already had this lunch. I've already asked you this question probably 5 times, and here we are again learning this same lesson. And you gave me the bar of soap analogy. Will you tell these people about that? Because it's hands down it's allowed me to give myself grace, learning the same lesson over and over again. Will you talk to me about that?
Yeah, I told you that, the lesson is different all the time. And it's as if you have a bar of soap and you're washing or you're cleaning something off, but you basically take one layer of the soap off and it's just another layer and just another layer. And that each of the layers have a reason behind them or an aspect for them. And you can't shortcut to the middle of the bar. You have to go through the layers. And that was something that, again, being analytical, I kept thinking, well, there's got to be a shortcut.
I'm already
here.
thinking of them. You can break that thing in half. You can throw it. You can chop it. You can soak it in water, and then you can break. I mean, there's a lot of.
And
then the bar just keeps reappearing.
And the bar keeps reappearing. And that's what I told Tessa. I said, the lesson keeps coming back to you until you've learned everything that the lesson is meant to teach you. And, I look in my own life, and I've had several things that were like that. And I'll take one example that actually became a challenge for me. And that was, I grew up predominantly in a Mormon community. And so I had adopted a lot of rules and limitations around me, around the way I lived. It was just part of the culture. And one of those was not drinking. So when I moved to New York at the age of 25, I was not drinking, but all of my friends at the age of 25 in New York are drinking. And so I would end out year after year with them, and they would have a happy hour, and they'd, party and play. And finally, it was on my 30th birthday that my girlfriend said, Rae, why don't you just now, you're like old enough, give yourself permission. And that's the first teacher that alcohol became, was a teacher of permission. And I had to decide in that moment, is that true? Who is giving me more permission, faith or myself? And obviously I decided, yeah, I think I'm old enough to make that decision. And I made that decision and drank champagne that night. And after that, I was a social drinker and could easily have it or not have it or whatever. And then it was much later in my life that, having a business and having the stress of a business, that alcohol showed up as a different teacher. And this time it was like, oh, maybe if I just had 3 glasses at dinner instead of 1, that then I just felt better. I didn't have all those worries and problems that my mind was creating. And it suddenly turned, and my relationship with alcohol changed. And there was a lot of judgment that I had for myself in that process. And I started to feel really weak that I had this experience or this relationship with alcohol that felt, again, like it was driving me versus me driving it. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh, wait, it's a teacher. It's here to teach me something. And it's to teach me all about me again. And that whole experience of going into a choice and saying, I don't want this anymore, and recognizing what it was doing for me and what it was doing against me, and then me choosing, was the lesson. And I remember someone said, well, how long did you struggle with teacher? I said, I struggled until I graduated from the teacher. I finally reached a point where that teacher had nothing more to teach me, and I graduated. So I never felt that I had an addiction, and I know that for people that struggle with alcohol. I know how real that can be and feel. But for me, there was just more and more lessons about myself for me to learn. And it was one of the most expansive teachers and also one of the hardest teachers.
I mean, it also sounds like alcohol for you, which can be a variety of different things for anybody. We often think things are happening to us and therefore we are victims of it and there's nothing we can do with it. And I think the big shift that you're touching on is, what if we just change that perspective for a moment and we stop thinking this is happening to me and ask ourselves, why is this happening? It's not necessarily happening to me. I'm a player in the game, but
Right.
This is an opportunity for learning rather than a judgment, a battle that's going to ensue.
Yeah, and that was where I had to get, because there were definitely times where I felt a victim to it, like it was happening to me. Oh my goodness, I should have never drank when I was 30.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
the
all
shame and the
these
blame game.
games, and then suddenly it just started to shift, and as it shifted, it just became really apparent that this is another teacher, and it may be a painful teacher, but we all have those teachers. And then I started to see that, failed relationships, arguments, strained relationships with family members, all of those can be teachers if we can lift them to a place where we can say, what is this here to teach me? Versus have a relationship with it that is in conflict and that you are constantly trying to battle it versus learn from it.
Curiosity.
Yeah,
Lean
curiosity.
into it.
Mm-hmm. And that the bar of soap gets smaller.
And the bar
Every
of soap
time you
gets
pick it
small.
up and think of it as a lesson and a teacher rather than something that's happening to you.
Right.
That
and
just helps me out so much. Every time I'm up against that, what feels like the same lesson, but a different layer, I have you in my mind going, but the bar of soap gets easier to hold and you get through the lesson quicker. So as you're mentioning this alcohol story, like it's hard, simpler,
Until it's not.
simpler, and then it's not.
and then it's
right?
not.
And then it's
that's
not.
that's the way it is with any of it. And it can also shift, because the reality is the bar of soap is you. So you will never go to no bar. You will still have you, but you'll have a different relationship with yourself as well. And you'll become more curious and inquisitive about who you are and what you're meant to do, and become less in conflict with yourself and what your purpose is, and you start to see things differently. Like, man, maybe there's a bigger purpose than being a business owner. Maybe there's a purpose that is meant to be something that is very creative that's calling me, that there's no purpose outside anyone but myself to learn. And during COVID, I experienced that. I had a experience where I woke up one day and I told Scott, I'm going to make sourdough bread. And he's like, really? And I said, yeah, I'm going to make sourdough bread. And in making sourdough bread, I have had the most powerful lesson about myself and about what I can do with my hands and what I enjoy doing and how it needs my attention. Not having children, I haven't had that experience, but I have sourdough bread that teaches me a lot about that.
Plants.
I have roses
Dogs.
now that, that teach. It comes and fills the gaps of things that we're meant to learn about ourselves that we haven't yet.
All right. Well, if your mind is being blown about being a bar of soap, because mine is at the moment, Rae, I just want to say thank you. I often don't get the same amount of time with you as clearly as Tessa does, but I would like more of this, because this was really beautiful to be able to talk about all these things and hear about your stories, and to give our audience just a little bit of a wrap up, because you have said so many things, like you are the soap, that have blown my mind. So I know everybody else got a lot out of this. I think to wrap it up in some of those key takeaways, this idea that we are our biggest asset is truly true. And I think it's easy for us to forget that and to move away from it by using our thinking brain and not our intuition. And
Betting on yourself,
Yeah, betting on yourself.
owning your own destiny.
Just pretty much everything. Asking yourself, what do you want? What do you need? What's going to light you up, etc. Those are all just so important things. And some of the ways to get there that I heard was comparison of yourself to others is a deal breaker. That's just gonna chop you down into little pieces and keep you small. And as much as small is comfortable and small is accepted by the outside world, fuck it. We're not here to be small. We're here to be big. We're here to be us. And that's super important. And then also this idea that instead of things happening to us, these circumstances that occur, really they're opportunities for us to learn and learn continually from those things. And it's a never ending story of bars of soap, bars of soap, bars of soap as they get smaller and smaller and easier, but it's always going to be there. Yeah. And we can't use our thinking brain to soak it, to then break it. Because I know it would theoretically get soft enough for me to be able to just crush it in that one moment. But it's really about the experience of it. And
what is it here to teach us?
And what is it here to teach us? And those things, they're huge and they're so simple at the same time. But it is a daily practice of continually thinking about them and getting us there. Yeah.
Thinking versus knowing.
Oh, yeah. I got to be careful now about the word think.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is a
Thinking
daily
versus
practice.
insight.
Yeah. And also, I mean, on this idea of heart and head, we talk about it in separate spaces, but it really is the all. It is the one thing together. It just is easy to talk about in two pieces because it helps us get understanding behind it. But really, when we're thinking, we're using just our brain. But when we're knowing, we're using that whole. We're using the brain and the intuition and all of the things that are really just us, which is...
And you want to return to that wholeness where you're using all of your potential and all of your gifts and talents to guide that path rather than just the mind.
We are all.
Yeah, I love that.
We are all one.
Thank you for letting me wrap those up. I love a bullet point. My brain appreciates that
I'm
opportunity.
impressed.
I love just, when you're in fear, right? When we're being driven by fear, you had a couple moments for us coming back to that wholeness and back to that center is always your advice to me. So thank you for sharing it with the people here. I feel so lucky that you all get to hear from Rae, and she's now a part of your life.
And isn't that cool? That really,
it's so cool.
My ego loves to know the answer is just inside of you. I'm like,
heck
yeah, great. Ego stoked on this one.
Put down the books, put down your notepad, put down your Excel spreadsheet, put down your goal setting, and go back to yourself.
And then use the tools, which are everything you just listed.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing. I've had the pleasure of having you facilitate a medicine journey for me and for others. And I want everyone to know where else you can find Rae. So Rae, I also love your podcast. Can you talk about your podcast?
Yeah, Scott and I started a podcast called The Observatory 3 years ago, and it's all about the inner journey. So my husband likes to say, the whole experience of life is you observing you being you. So the Observatory podcast is helping people see and get glimpses of others that are in that process. So and that can be found on all podcast platforms, The Observatory, and it can also be found on Instagram as The Observatory Pod. And then I'm also on Instagram as Rae_Wright.
And also talk about, I've also had the experience of going to a recent retreat. Can you talk a little bit about the upcoming retreats that you're hosting?
Yes, so we've started doing very experiential retreats, and they're called You Are the Medicine retreats. And so again, you can go on Instagram as You Are the Medicine retreats and find out when we're having them and when they'll be. But this was something that we just recently felt called to. And again, it being less thinking and, teaching people about how your nervous system works and all of that. Instead of doing that, you actually come and experience that. So the experience of allowing yourself to return to knowing you are the medicine is the whole point of the retreats. And they're 4 days. They're deep dives, but very enjoyable because it's not classroom. You're outside, you're doing various things. And
I heard there were horses involved, and I was
there
very
are horses.
bummed to have missed it.
Yeah, there are horses and just a beautiful community. So of like-minded people that are wanting to discover why they are their medicine. And they kind of know that. They want to go deeper with it. So yes, look us up. Come join us. We'd love to have you.
And then lastly, what's lighting you up right now, Rae?
There's so many things. Definitely the retreats with Scott is fabulous. Another thing that I recently started is certifying with Gabor Mate, compassionate inquiry, which
We got to put some resources down
Yes,
for people
please.
about
because
Gabor. Yeah.
it was such an invitation that came very lightly to me, and it kind of created this inquisitiveness. And little did I know that I started it about a month and a half ago, and the first 4 months are a very deep dive into yourself and into your childhood, and it has just been magical and surprising and beautiful to create this space of compassion and inquiry into yourself. And then from there, we'll spend 4 months doing relationships that are close to you. And then the last 4 months, it's relationships that are more community and external of you. And his work is fascinating, and it just expansive again. It's beautiful.
Grow down so you can just become that
Tiny
original version of
human.
yourself that was so big and beautiful. And then after you've served yourself and given yourself what you need, that's where in the best place to serve others.
Right.
You once gave me this quote that was something like, it's not about finding yourself, it's about excavating the self that's always been there.
Right.
And I still have it on my mirror. And so thank you for reminding me of that every single time I see you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And ladies, thank you for inviting me to be here. I have
Our
thoroughly
pleasure.
enjoyed this conversation. I love these kind of deep dives. And so thank you for letting me join you on your podcast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Pod Squad, can I call them that? That's not
You
a thing.
can now.
Is that a thing?
Just go with
Pod
it.
people, pod community. You can find more of us on Geneva. We engage with you there. We would love to hear from you and what's working for you, what's not working for you, and what's lighting you up.
Yeah, what curiosities do you have? Or you can find us on Instagram. Hit it.
You can find us on Instagram at maven.community.
Well, thanks, Rae. This was absolutely a delight.
Yeah, thank you.
And this is our first foray into having an outside guest, like we had previously mentioned, and whew, I feel so much relief.
I'm relieved.
It was fun.
We crushed it.
Thank you. Thanks for showing up as yourselves, both of you.
All of you.
All of
All
us.
All of us.
We are
Yes.
good.
It's amazing.
We fucking rock.
All right. Well, I love you, partner.
Love you too.
Love you, Rae.
Love you guys.
Love you a lot.
Bye.